everybody. Welcome to another edition of the No BS Zone. I'm Bernie Goldberg. I'm wearing a hat today because my friend John Daly, the Renaissance man of the Rockies, is wearing a hat. I just wanted to
Yeah,
be, I wanted to make sure I was stylishly suited for the occasion.
excellent. I appreciate that, Bernie. Our shirts even kind of look similar now that I look at them.
We didn't plan this, folks.
No.
And we're about 2,000 miles apart also. Let's start with a story that the media is playing up as one of the big stories of certainly the week, the year, the century. And it's because journalists think that what we journalists do is the most important thing in the world. I'm talking about the firing of Scott Pelley at 60 Minutes. Let's put this into perspective for openers. There was a time when 1 in 3 Americans watched 60 Minutes. Now they have 9 million viewers watching. 9 million, it's a lot of viewers, but that represents about 3% of the United States population, which means 97% of the people in the United States are not watching 60 Minutes. But you can't measure importance simply based on audience size. So let's ask the question, is what happened at 60 Minutes important? You can make the case that it is. And it is because there are two theories floating around out there. One is that CBS News hired the people who bought CBS News, the new people who bought CBS News, brought in Barry Weiss to run the operation. And the new people are friends with Donald Trump. And one theory is that Barry Weiss was brought in to make sure Donald Trump is happy with what goes on at CBS News because the new owners of CBS News also want to be the new owners of CNN. They're in the process of trying to buy it. And they want Barry Weiss to smooth the way by making Donald Trump happy about what's happening at CBS. If the new owners, David Ellison, and backed up by his father's money, Larry Ellison, one of the 2 or 3 richest people on the planet, the founder of Oracle. If they own CNN and CBS News and they're friendly to Donald Trump, yeah, that's important. That has consequences. Now, one piece of information to back up this theory. I spoke to a former executive of CBS News who said, I'm not usually a believer in conspiracies, but here's one conspiracy theory I may very well sign on to. Donald Trump doesn't like 60 Minutes. He doesn't like Scott Pelley. He doesn't like Stephen Colbert. Colbert is gone. Scott Pelley is gone. And 60 Minutes has a new boss. You don't have to be paranoid, John. You don't have to be paranoid to believe that maybe there's something to the theory that Donald Trump is a major factor in all of this. The other theory is very simple, that Barry Weiss was brought in by the new owners to balance out the liberal bias at CBS News and move the news organization to the center. But because people at CBS News and in mainstream media generally don't believe they're doing anything wrong, they hate Barry Weiss inside CBS News. I wrote a column on my website that ended, Barry Weiss takes the job at CBS News. She's going to need luck. I wish her all the best because she's going to need it. She may be in over her head. We'll find out soon enough. What do you think, John?
Yeah, I think you're probably right. That those are the two theories. I am by no means an insider, but my thought is that it was probably the latter and not the former. I think if they really wanted to please Donald Trump, they could have chosen somebody who was a little more friendly to Donald Trump than Barry Weiss. I mean, she was hired at the New York Times years ago to kind of do exactly what you just described. The second theory being for CBS News was to give voice to stories that might have otherwise gone unrepresented. and people resented her there as well, and that's why she ended up being gone. I don't, you know, if you read her stuff and you kind of look at who she platforms, I never identified her as someone who was, you know, pro MAGA or pro Trump. So I tend to believe the second theory is the correct one.
I
You know,
I could tell you, John, that either virtually or literally, there are no people inside CBS News who don't believe that she's there to do the bidding of Donald Trump. You may be right. I want to be very clear about that. But nobody inside CBS News is buying that.
do you have which theory do you think you subscribe to? I know you're not on the inside, so you have a different
Well, I
perspective.
think ground zero is CBS News gave Donald Trump $16 million to settle a lawsuit against 60 Minutes. Donald Trump said they did a piece with Kamala Harris to make her look good and him look bad. It was a ridiculous, frivolous lawsuit that would have gone nowhere. But it smoothed the way for David Ellison to buy CBS News. So once you go down that road, paying Donald Trump to smooth the way for the purchase, maybe Donald Trump now needs to give his blessings to the purchase of CNN also. And you don't want CBS doing negative stories about Donald Trump, making him unhappy where he might not give the blessings. So I don't know. I don't know if Barry Weiss is there to make CBS News more fair, or she's there to make Donald Trump more happy. I don't know. But unlike people at CBS News, I'm willing to say the jury is out. Let's wait and see.
And I think, Bernie, you said that if you just narrow this down to Scott Pelley specifically, what he was fired for, you agree that it would be considered an objectively fireable offense in any other company?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. And I told this to Jeff Fager, former executive producer of 60 Minutes, and he spoke to me on the record. I said, I think when a guy comes in to introduce himself, to say, I'm the new boss here, I want to meet everybody, and Scott Pelley lays into him and says, you don't have the credentials to do this job, and your boss is out to kill CBS News and kill 60 Minutes, I think that's grounds for firing. Now, Jeff Fager said to me, very graciously, Bernie, I understand your position, but the new guy needed to understand that 60 Minutes is a feisty place. That's Fager's word, a feisty place. People, he said, yell at each other all the time around here. And maybe the new guy, Nick Bilton, should have been aware of the culture at 60 Minutes and should have been less sensitive, and in one sense, less sensitive and not be so offended, and more sensitive to what Scott Pelley was saying. Somebody else who was a former producer at 60 Minutes said, F you is the way they say good morning to each other at 60 Minutes.
That's what you said to me when we logged in this morning, Bernie.
That's not true.
I'm joking. That didn't happen.
So the point is, there is an atmosphere at 60 Minutes. It isn't even the same building as CBS News. It is a part of CBS News, but apart from CBS News. There is an arrogance there, an arrogance that says, we know what we're doing, we're good at what we're doing, we have a 50-year track record to prove it, and we don't want some outsider coming in telling us what to do.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. You know, I mean, you bring up good points, some stuff to consider for sure.
Now, let me end this segment with one thing from Jerry Baker. Has a column in the Wall Street Journal. And there was one line that caught my eye. He said, people get fired in America every day. And most of them don't get fired for calling their boss incompetent. They just get fired. But when you get fired in the news business, it becomes a crime scene. You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah.
It's like we journalists, and let's admit it, there's an arrogance. we, especially if you're on a network TV show, which I used to be, no longer, long gone from CBS News, we know what we're doing. You don't tell us what we're doing. So there's an arrogance there. And that's why when one of us gets fired, Scott Pelley in this case, it becomes a crime scene. Okay, let's move on to another TV show. It's been on the air even longer than 60 Minutes, Meet the Press. Donald Trump was on Meet the Press this past Sunday, and it was going well until somehow, I don't know how, the 2020 election came up and Donald Trump, who is obsessed with believing, I mean, I think in a mentally ill way, obsessed with believing that the 2020 election was stolen from him, was rigged. And Kristen Welker, the host of 60 Minutes, said, you have any evidence? Donald Trump got angry. Donald Trump said the California election is rigged. She said, do you have any evidence? He got angry. Now, before I tell you what happened next, they're still counting votes in California. Come on. That is pathetic, unreasonable, and embarrassing. And it might lead a reasonable person to say, hey, what's going on? Are they cheating? But there's no evidence of that. And Donald Trump, whenever his side loses, he says they cheat, the other side cheated. So she kept saying, do you have any evidence? And he got annoyed enough at one point that he took off his mic. He said, thank you, darling, got up and walked away. I thought it was embarrassing for Donald Trump, not for Kristen Welker. Did you see it, John?
Yeah, I did, and you brought up at the top there that you don't know what led to us. It was Trump that started this. That Welker was asking him about the $1.8 billion weaponization fund, and he jumped to the 2020 election being stolen and January 6th conspiracies and all that. And Welker, and that's it was funny kind of reading some of the reaction, from the MAGA side to this, where they were like, why was she jumping on that? I'm like, well, because he's the one who brought it up. She felt as a journalist it was important to point out that there was no evidence of these claims, and she didn't really want to stay on that. She kind of wanted to move on to the next thing, and he was sort of the one who led to the back and forth engagement there. So yeah, I was curious what you were going to say on this, Bernie, because I saw some serious people online who were kind of making the point that she was the one who was out of line on this, and that she was being rude.
Not even close.
Okay, I'm glad you said that. Now I can actually post this video clip in reply, Bernie, to some people who were saying that I was the one out of line by thinking that she was doing her job.
No, not even it isn't even a close call. If somebody makes an accusation, if I say the earth is flat, you have every right, you have an obligation to say, do you have any evidence of that? Well, when Donald Trump says the 2020 election was rigged, after his own lawyers went into court 60 times to make that case and lost 60 times, if a journalist doesn't say, do you have any evidence of that, then the journalist is wrong. You have to say, do you have any evidence? And then he tacks on the California race. That's also rigged. Well, do you have any evidence of that? No. I'm not necessarily a fan of her work. I don't like her style, but she didn't do anything wrong in this case.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it seems to me that if a journalist neglects to point out a recklessly false statement from a powerful person, a political leader in this instance, you're really doing a public disservice if you don't do that. And I know this has driven you crazy in the nuts, Bernie, when you're watching, whether it's Fox interviewing Trump or someone in the liberal media and interviewing Joe Biden, where the person they are interviewing will say something that's demonstrably untrue, and then the journalist just sits there like a potted plant and doesn't respond to that. And she did what was right. I agree.
And yesterday, my friend Bill O'Reilly said to me, he said she was confrontational. She could have said, do you have any evidence, or in terms of you earlier she said, you said there'd be no wars. Now there's a war. You wouldn't go to any war. Now there's a war. She could have said, at one point you said that you wouldn't go start any new wars. And what changed, Mr. President? Well, that's Bill unduly defending Donald Trump, I think. I don't think she did anything wrong. Let's move on.
Sure.
Let's move on to a similar question. I asked, is what's happening at 60 Minutes important? Is what's happening in a small northeastern state that almost everybody watching us has never been to important? And the state is Maine. I've been to all 50 states, and I think Maine was the last state I set foot in. They're having a primary while we speak. Graham Platner will win the primary and become the Democrats' nominee for Senate against Susan Collins. Is it important? Yes. And it's important for one reason, because whatever happens in Maine may decide which party controls the Senate. May. If it's close, Maine will matter. I don't want to go down a whole litany of Graham Platner's sins. He had a Nazi tattoo on his chest for 18 years, which he conveniently removed when he decided to run for Senate. He said he didn't know what it was. Nobody believes that.
Right.
He said, to use a common word today, inappropriate things about women. He made racial comments. He's a mess. He's the kind of candidate no Democrat, no liberal Democrat would want to get near. Yet, liberal and progressive Democrats have joined his campaign for only one reason. Only one reason. They hate Donald Trump and don't want to give Susan Collins a victory, which would help Donald Trump control the Senate, his party control the Senate. So in that sense, the Maine election is very important. And by the way, Susan Collins is the most moderate Republican in the Senate.
Right.
When Donald Trump was impeached the second time, she voted to convict him. Mm-hmm. And Ro Khanna, who doesn't have the guts to admit he's running for president, who's out there on a stage. Ro Khanna is a progressive from California, a congressman from California. He's on a stage with Graham Platner, Bernie Sanders, and Elizabeth Warren, the two most prominent progressives in the Senate, are endorsing him. Democrats are embarrassing themselves by endorsing a man like Graham Platner, but they're doing it, as I say, for just one reason. They hate Donald Trump.
Yeah. And Bernie, so you and I have taken lots of slings and arrows over the years for arguing that a political leader's character matters and that a candidate's fitness to serve matters. And weirdly, I think that many people on the left who would agree with us on that point when we're talking about Donald Trump are now supporting Graham Platner, of all people, so that the Democrats, as you said, can win back the Senate majority to better oppose Trump. And I think that rationale is crazy. Graham Platner is a terrible person who's done terrible things. He is glaringly unfit for public office. And yet you have, people on the left who are arguing that it's vitally important to vote for this Nazi tattoo guy in order to stop fascism. And like you said, it doesn't even occur to them that if they truly view Donald Trump as a fascist, they should actually feel pretty good about their incumbent Republican Senator, Susan Collins, who voted to convict him in his impeachment. I mean, if Collins had gotten her way, Trump would have been disqualified from ever running for office again. So why on earth is it that important to elect the Nazi tattoo guy? And it's just the seat. They want to overlook everything except for that one seat.
Which segues right into another segment. I wrote a column this week that said, if, and I emphasize the word if the Democrats take over the Senate, a whole bunch of very bad things, in my view, bad things could happen, assuming they're going to take the House, which I think is a safe assumption.
Right.
If they take, and I'm going to list what I said in the column, and I'm only doing this because I want to know if you, John Daly, think I went too far.
Okay.
if they take over the House, which they will, I'm sure, and then if they take over the Senate, they very likely certainly could, and I think may very well kill the filibuster. If they kill the filibuster, they could do all sorts of things. They could make Washington, D.C. a state. They could make Puerto Rico a state. They certainly could, because they talk about this already, they could pack the Supreme Court. These are all things that could happen. Now, I also say maybe none of it would happen. But when you talk about this stuff and you want this stuff to happen, all I'm saying is it could happen. But I'm wondering, do you think I'm paranoid about this? Do you think I went too far?
Well, I mean, as far as motivations go, I wouldn't put anything past anybody, but I will say I don't think it can happen. So I was looking into this a little bit, and so even if the filibuster is removed, I think the president can still veto any of these things. So if they were to remove the filibuster and they tried to pack the court, or they tried to grant statehood to Washington, D.C. or Puerto Rico, they would still face a presidential veto. And if the president vetoes that, then I think you have to get 2/3 again with the filibuster even removed. I think you'd still have to get a 2/3 majority in both Senate and Congress and to override that presidential veto. So
in 2028,
mhm.
if they still have a majority of the Democrats in the Senate and the House, and a Republican, and a Democrat is elected president, then anything could happen, yes?
In 2028, I think it's much more of a concern about removing the filibuster. In 2026, after the midterms, no. I mean, with Donald Trump in power, it's not going to happen. But you're right; things could change in 2028, and whether they're willing to do that or not. I mean, I will say that they had a chance. So when Roe versus Wade was overturned, and everybody on the left freaked out, Joe Biden was president at the time, and he had a Democratic Senate and he had a Democratic House, and none of this was done there was no initiative to pack the court. That people talked about it, but there was nothing serious done. So I guess maybe that gives me some hope that it wouldn't happen, even if we have a Democratic president after 2028. But you never know. I mean, it's the ability would be there.
Can we assume they would try?
I don't know. I mean, they didn't try after Roe versus Wade, and I thought if it was going to happen, it was going to happen then, at a time when the left was just outraged and wanted something to be done to, in their view, fix what had just happened, and it didn't happen. But again, Joe Biden, he did a lot of pretty far left stuff while he was in office, but at the same time, I think he may well be considered a moderate compared to who the Democrats may nominate in 2028 and who may win. So, maybe if you have a president AOC, something, then I can see, well, maybe this is something we got to look at more seriously. This might happen.
Donald Trump is making a case, and I don't think it's a crazy case. I think it's a wrong case to make, but not a crazy one, that Republicans should kill the filibuster now while they're in charge and get stuff that he wants done, the president wants done. And the Republicans in the Senate are holding firm, saying it's a bad idea. You don't want to kill the filibuster because the Democrats could do it too. So Donald Trump's position is we should do it because they're going to do it. I think it's a bad idea to kill the filibuster, but I do think that Chuck Schumer or whoever leads the Senate after November is likely to kill the filibuster. I don't think that's out of the question. Okay. The other question I have for you, John, is Hakeem Jeffries, the Speaker of the House and likely the next Speaker of the House after November, said, when we're in charge, anything, and he emphasized the word anything is on the table when it comes to the Supreme Court. Anything. What do you think that means?
That may be what he's alluding to. I think someone like Hakeem Jeffries is saying what he thinks the base wants to hear at this point in time. The Democratic base is who I'm talking about, but they're very frustrated. They're annoyed that they can't really do anything at this point. And so, I think that if you throw out these very generic promises where you don't specifically say what you're going to say, but you say all things are on the table, I think that's a politically savvy way of ginning up support for Democratic voters to support Democratic candidates, including those who've been frustrated with Democratic candidates in the Democratic Party. So I think politically speaking, it's probably smart. I wouldn't, take that to the bank that he's going to do something radical. And even though, it's legal to pack the court if you go through the right process. Yeah, you're right. I think it's a really bad idea. I think it would be radical to do that. So if I had to bet money, and I wouldn't bet any money on it, my guess is that they will not do that. But I could be wrong.
All right. I think that's it for today. Let me just end with a thought about CBS News, a place I worked for 28 years. No, it's not the most important story in the country or in the world or in the solar system. It is not. But I'm keeping an eye on what happens there, because if CNN is bought by the same people who bought CBS News, they're going to control two major television networks. And if they are trying to make Donald Trump happy, that is not a good thing. But I'm not jumping to conclusions. All right. One more thing. I want to thank all the new people that came over from Bill O'Reilly's show. We really appreciate your coming over and contributing. Feel free to contribute to the conversation. If you don't like something I wrote or what John wrote, let us know. And if you do like it, great. Let us know about that too. You have the ability to do it on our website. Thank you. Thank you for coming over. And that's it for this edition of the No BS Zone. We'll see you next time. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Bernie.